Hi, thanks for joining me. So today we're going to do a update on my translation projects, and I hadn't been intending to do an update this soon, but it turns out that the past 3 months have been super busy in terms of translation projects, and I didn't want this to get ridiculously long, so I realized I'd probably better go ahead and make a quarter two update for 2018, so you guys know what has been going on. We have some releases from the past 3 months, which is amazing, especially considering that I'd been mentioning in 2017 I had had almost no, completed English language translation patches that had gotten released. Just at the very end of the year, Supper and I squeezed out Battle Golfer Yui, but this year has been just a roll of one released project after another. In this case, we have G.O.D, or Growth or Devolution, on the Super Famicom. And this is the game that I talked about in my reactions to my fan translation projects, so I'm not going to go on about it at length, but suffice to say it's a traditional turn-based RPG on the Super Famicom that had never been released in the West. And yeah, I probably translated like maybe 20 to 25% of the script. It was a huge, long script though, and I don't know. I mean, maybe it was 30%. I don't know. The original translator had left some stuff untranslated in the main script, and pretty much all of the miscellaneous text was untranslated. So I worked on that, and it's a cool game. I recommend you guys check it out. If you want to know a little bit more about that, I'd check out my other reactions to reactions to fan translation projects video. Probably the same with the other released project, Ranma half Chogi Ranbuhen. This is a versus fighter game, again for the Super Famicom, never released outside of Japan. And it's funny, there were a couple of other Ranma 1/2 versus fighters, one of which was released in North America as Ranma 1/2 Hard Battle. One was released here as Street Combat, I think it was, and it was totally redone, took out all of the references to Ranma 1/2. But I really think that Chogi Ranbuhen is the best, hands down, easily, of all of those fighting games, and I think it kind of stands up there with the original Street Fighter 2. It's like a Street Fighter 2 versus fighter, and I think it's really well done. The graphics are good, the fighting is fun, and it's like a mid-90s versus fighter. So I would expect, if you're familiar with the games from that era, don't expect anything more than that, but it's pretty cool. It has a tag team mode, so you have it. You can do tag team battles. The story mode is fun. I translated all the text for it. It was a super fun project, and it has unfortunately had to go through a bunch of revisions. So you'll want to get the latest translation patch for that. But that one should have all of the things translated that we want to have translated, everything edited, everything should be good with that one. And I'm just happy as a clam with how that project turned out. And the next one is not actually a project that I worked on, but it's the project that I set up a little bit of a quid pro quo with Supper around our translation of Battle Golfer Yui. I had agreed to ensure that Bishoujo Senshi Sailor Moon got translated for the Sega Mega Drive. And I didn't actually do that translation. I passed it on to Aien Nihen because I figured that she would enjoy translating that because, I asked her if she would, and she wanted to. So she took care of the translation, passed that back to me. I gave that to Supper, and the project was released. So I wasn't really involved in that, but was just wanted to let you guys know about it because it's a cool game. So the next thing I want to talk about is sort of more work that I did during this time period that wasn't related to released projects, and a lot of that work was dumped scripts. I somehow got on this crusade to dump a whole bunch of scripts from games, and I think the impetus for that was really that translations of early Famicom games thread on romhacking.net that Cyclox started. And I really wanted to support that. And so from the time period that we're trying to, get projects completed for, there's a number of games left, and I decided that probably the best way I could help with that effort is just to go through that whole list and see if I could dump scripts for as many, see how many of those games I could dump scripts for. So let's just go through a list here. The first game is Artelius, and actually I don't even remember what kind of game that is. You guys can look it up. Maybe I'll put some screenshots up. But I made a couple table files for it. It seems like text must be encoded in a couple different formats in the game, and it seems like it has some dictionary compression, which I didn't decide to try to deal with at the time. I may come back and take another look at that. But suffice to say, I started working on that a little bit. Next up is a game called Family Trainer. And you guys may or may not know, Family Trainer, I believe, is what the Power Pad was called in Japan. So there were a number of Family Trainer games that came out in Japan that never came out in North America, at least. One of them is called Meido Dai Sakusen, or I would call it Operation Maze. And it's actually an interesting looking little Family Trainer game. I made a table file for it. I dumped the script. As far as I can tell, there's almost no text in the game at all. It's I mean, there's a little bit, but it's very little. So that was easy enough to do. I'll probably go ahead and just translate that script. Next up, we have a game called Law of the West. Now, this is interesting because it's actually a game that was developed in the West, and it was then ported to the Famicom. So the Japanese script for this is theoretically based on the original English language script. So I'm really curious about this in terms of kind of like what would be the best thing to do with this. Like, I'm curious just to see if I started translating the script, for instance, like if how closely it matches the original script, and also if it would make sense to just kind of take the original English language script and shoehorn that into the Famicom port. I'm not really sure what the best thing is to do on that, but I did dump a script for it. The script is about 80k of text. So a point that I made at the end of my last translation projects update video is that I don't have to be the person to translate all of these games. That's one of the reasons why I passed that script on to Andy Hen. She translated the Sailor Moon game for Supper, and the same way with these old Famicom games. I'm probably not even intending to translate all these ones that I dumped. I just figured if I can dump these scripts and they're translation ready, if somebody else wants to translate them, then that's a translated script that's out there, and that's one step farther that this project is closer to being completed than it was before a script was dumped or before a script was translated. So anyway, Law of the West is available. I went ahead and made a post on romhacking.net just saying, hey, here's some scripts that are free for people to translate if they would like to, and get back to me if you want the script, and I'll hand it to you. So certainly, if anyone is watching this who has some skills in Japanese and is interested in translating any of these games, let me know. The next one is Hokkaido Rensa Satsujin. It's got a subtitle. I don't know what it is. So anyway, I made a table file for that. I didn't actually dump a script because it does something a little weird with its diacritical marks, but I may go back and take a look at that again. I have a feeling I can dump a good script from that. The other two games here are actually also murder mystery games. We have Sanma no Meitante. Meitante being like a detective, like Sherlock Holmes style, like a famous detective. So I made a table file for this. I checked it in the game to make sure that it was right. Some of the values. I dumped the script, and that's available. It's about 75k of text. So it's kind of like a medium-sized. It's a text adventure, so but a medium-sized amount of text for the Famicom. And also Yamamura Misa Suspense, which is a series. I think there are other games in the Yamamura Misa Suspense series. This one being Kyoto Ryu no Tera Satsujin, so another murder mystery. So I made a table file for that. Went ahead and dumped the script. That's about 100k of text, so just a little bit bigger than the previous game. But I was excited to have made a bunch of progress on dumping scripts, and I kind of, when you start doing something like that, sometimes you can build up a little bit of momentum. So I felt like I had a thing going with getting a bunch of scripts I shouldn't say translated, dumped, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. But suffice to say, Supper got a hold of me, really just offered to help me out with the Magic Knight Rayearth project on the Game Gear. This is a project that I had started quite a while ago. It was something that I had done kind of like these Famicom games, where I had made a table file myself, I had dumped a script myself, and I had translated it back in the day. And I had been working on it with someone else, and the project just didn't really go all that well, and so it had been dead for a number of years. And but Supper agreed to look at it, and man, he's done awesome work on it. I'm super excited with where that's going. But in terms of dumping scripts, it got me looking at the Game Gear a bit. And I'm kind of a Game Gear fan. I actually owned a Game Gear I think in the late 90s maybe, which is after it was contemporary. It was contemporary kind of in the late 80s, if I remember correctly. At least the early 90s. So I was a little late to the game, and I never really had very many games for it, or played it all that much. But it's grown on me more and more over the years. I love how ambitious it is. I love how it was backlit, and it was color, and it was like everything that the Game Boy wasn't. And the games are actually there's a lot of really good games on it. And in Japan there were quite a few anime-based games that were released for it too, which I find fun. So I just decided, let me do the same thing that I was doing for these Famicom games on the Game Gear, and just see how many I can dump, because there aren't that many games that weren't localized and released in the West on the Game Gear, just because there weren't a ton of games on the system. There were quite a few. I don't know the exact number. Probably a good couple hundred, few hundred, something like that. But out of the ones that are left untranslated, there's actually some pretty cool stuff in there. So let's just go through the games that I was successful in dumping a script for. The first one being Bishojo Senshi Sailor Moon S. And of course, Supper, being apparently a Sailor Moon fan, as I am, was immediately interested in translating, or in hacking this game, doing the technical work on making an English language translation patch. So I've actually translated all the text I dumped. That may not have been all of the text in the game, but I actually have passed that on to Supper. So knock on wood, that might be a project, translation patch coming up here at some point. We'll see how that goes. Next up, we have Kaito Saint Tail. Now, this is a magical girl anime series, speaking of Sailor Moon and Magic Knight Rayearth. And I'm familiar with it, but I'd never seen any of it. It's kind of from the late 90s, if I remember correctly, as an anime series anyway. There was a manga series as well. And but yeah, it's super cute. I actually watched a couple episodes of it on YouTube, and it reminds me of just kind of the style of magical girl show, kind of like Cardcaptor Sakura. I would say it's probably at the time was inspired, maybe even more so than by things like Sailor Moon. I think maybe it was inspired maybe more by like Creamy Mommy and some of those like older magical girl shows, a lot of which, there's like one or two other ones that I can't remember the name of off the top of my head, but that we never really got a lot of here. So anyway, so it's sort of in that vein, formulaic, but cute. You have basically these two girls attending a middle school, and it seems like it's like probably a Catholic middle school. So one of the girls is actually preparing to become a nun, I guess, and she works in the chapel, the church. And so she'll hear people's like confessions, or people will come in and pray, and they'll be in need. They'll sort of be reaching out to God to ask for help. And so she literally hears their prayers and passes that information on to the mysterious thief Saint Tail, who, in a magical girl fashion, transforms, and she has, some like magical abilities that she uses, to the solutions to the people's problems always involve like stealing something or like returning something that was stolen. So Saint Tail is able to go and grant these people's prayers. So it's a very cute show, and the game seems kind of cool too. It's, I guess, not, I there's an idea, I want to say, of sort of the legitimacy of games. I feel like some genres of games by gamers, by and large, not across the board, but are kind of considered a little more legitimate than other ones. And I'd say Kaito Saint Tail is probably in the slightly less legitimate category of, it's like kind of an action puzzly game with some mini games to it. The kind of thing that you would see, especially on portable game systems. And it seems like a cute little game. But I think it was interesting to me, more from a technical perspective, because the text encoding was a little weird. It's actually padded with a whole bunch of like zeros interspersed in the regular text. It's sort of like 1 byte per character kind of a text encoding, but it had all this weird padding in it. And the way it like dealt with diacritical marks and things was a little bit strange for some of the text, and it just intrigued me. It started me wondering, hey, could I write my own text dumper? I've been involved in this hobby for, I think it may be going on 17, 18 years now. It's been at least over a decade and a half, and I've literally never written my own script dumper, which I just haven't really had to before. If I've been working on a game that's sort of, a little bit technically challenging just to get at the script, I've been able to work with talented people that could help me out with that. And I've gotten to concentrate more on the actual translation of the Japanese. But, I am familiar with PHP, and I program in that, or maybe technically write scripts in PHP, and it's, I just wondered, hey, could I do this? And doing a little research, I was like, yes, I can. I can open up a file. I can, read it in binary. I can convert it to hex. I can deal with it in the way that I need to. So I wrote a script dumper and dumped the whole script for Kaito Saint Tail. So I was really proud of myself for having done that. I think it was a really fun project. And I've translated most of the text, actually, so I'm looking forward to, maybe finding somebody to help out with that, and maybe releasing another translation patch here at some point. The other games I have not done any translation of, and no one is associated, I don't have anyone who's on board to help out with these, but I dumped scripts for Kishin Doji Zenki on the Game Gear, which seems like kind of an action side-scrolling game, maybe not really similar to, but vaguely related to the Super Famicom game that I helped translation check. And Kishin Doji Zenki, like I wasn't necessarily going out of my way to like translate more games in that series, but it seems like a pretty fun series, and it's a cool game. It just turned out that it wasn't hard to make a script file, a table file, and dump the script for that, so I did that. I also dumped a script for 3 Mado Monogatari games on the Game Gear. You guys may remember that I translated the first game in that series. They are dungeon crawling RPGs, and made by Compile. You have the characters that later went on to appear in the Puyo Puyo games, which is probably where people are more familiar with them. But I dumped a script for Mado Monogatari 2, Mado Monogatari 3, and Mado Monogatari A. And if you guys have been watching the videos that I posted in just the past, couple weeks, I actually did a short series of videos on dumping the script for Mado Monogatari 3. So if you want to check those out, if you haven't, you can find out a little bit more about what that process was like. And the last game that I dumped a script for on the Game Gear is Moldorian, which is an RPG it seems like a pretty interesting, like full-fledged RPG on the Game Gear. So like I was saying, on the Game Gear, there really are. There's just this low-hanging fruit in these games that have just been left on the table. Even though some people have translated some RPGs for the Game Gear, it seems like some of the stuff is just sitting there. So I kind of wanted to just dig into that library and see about dumping some scripts. I don't think I'd mentioned. I did actually ask Spinner8 if he would be so kind as to make a list of the games that are not yet translated on the Game Gear. The reason I asked him to do that is that he maintains a series of set of lists for various home console systems of games that are and are not do not have English language translation patches. So that was a really useful resource when as I've been looking at these Game Gear games. I really appreciate him doing that for me. But moving on into the last segment here, I'm just going to talk about like the stuff that's going to be coming up. So basically, Cyclax is working on Zoid's Battle of Central Continent. This is something that he agreed to since the last time I made one of these videos. You guys might remember that I had translated the full script. I dumped and translated the full script for Zoid's Battle of Central Continent. I put it out there with like help wanted ad, and nobody was really picking it up. And Cyclax, I think, was just looking at the stuff that was still out there to be translated, and figured he'd give it a shot. So lo and behold, we had the good news a couple months ago of him posting a screenshot of some inserted text, so we can see the font is in there. Text insertion seems to be working, and it sounds like he'd gotten over some of the kind of technical hurdles of the game. So I'm looking forward to seeing possibly a fully functional translation patch for that here pretty soon. We'll see how that goes. Speaking of Cyclax, though, I did want to mention that he has started a channel on YouTube. It's called Cyclaxia, and I'm going to go ahead and put a link to that in the description if you guys want to check that out. He did not ask me to do this. This is completely unsolicited, but just as a fellow YouTuber, my 78 subscribers here, if you want to check that out, I'd highly recommend it. He seems like is focusing on a couple things. It seems like one is just highlighting like hacks and translations that maybe people don't know about, and I'm totally on board with that. I think getting the word out about hacks and translations is a super good thing. So check out his videos about that. He actually did cover a project of mine, a translation project. What was it? Coca-Cola Kid on the Game Gear. If you guys remember in my reactions to my fan translations, I was a little dismissive of that game, and that's not because it's a bad game. It's just it was a short script, and it was very little effort on my part, but it's a pretty cool game. So if you want to know more about that, check out Cyclax's video. And it looks like he's also probably going to do a little bit of maybe some content on like the technical aspects of ROM hacking, and I'm super on board with that. You guys have seen, I have just done a little bit of some video content on that myself. So definitely check out his channel if you want to see a little bit more. On the dynamic designs front, probably the next game coming up, well, I shouldn't say probably, definitely, the next game coming up is Aretha 1. The Aretha games, and there were 2, on the Sega Game Gear, what am I talking about? On the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo Super Famicom, are traditional RPGs, and they seem pretty fun. I translated the whole first game. I translated half of the second game. Somebody else had already translated the rest of it. There are some other like games in the Aretha series. I think there is another one on the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom, I should say, and there's one on the Game Boy. There may be more than one on the Game Boy. I kind of forget, but there's at least one. And Anyway, that should be coming up here pretty soon. I don't want to say exactly when. Beta testing has started. One beta tester has finished it. I don't know exactly when this game will be released, or the English translation patch will be released, but I would expect that before I make another one of these videos. Additionally, some new project work is happening at Dynamic Designs, and I agreed to work on a game called Shinseiki Odessia. Jeez. It's a really weird word. But that seems like an interesting game. I'll go ahead and maybe put up a couple screenshots. The art style is really cool for this. As a note, just because it's a little shocking and something that is, one of these games that of this vintage, is that there is partial nudity in this game. There are bare breasts, and I'm just, like I said, I'm mentioning that just because I was like, oh, I didn't expect that. Certainly not the kind of thing that you think of when you think of like 16-bit gaming, especially considering that Nintendo of America was well known for being a bit draconian in their sanitizing of certain elements of games that were released in North America. So that was an interesting just bit of trivia, I think, about that game. But aside from that, it looks like a pretty cool RPG. It seems like it takes place, it's sort of like a fantasy story and setting, but it kind of takes place over different periods in history. So I'm interested to see what that's like. The first game is all in kana, and I get the impression, I think it was a little bit of an earlier game on the Super Famicom, so it may have even been originally going to be an NES game, but the graphics are actually quite good, so it seems like they really, if it was, they certainly transitioned development early in the project and went ahead and made a lot of really nice looking artwork for it. So hope you guys are looking forward to that. I'll probably not get started on that until like the end of this year, maybe the beginning of next year. And yeah, so other news, Aeni Hen agreed to translate Marusa no Onna. And this was a game that I talked about, I think, in my last video. It's based on the movie A Taxing Woman, directed by Juzo Itami. I won't go on at length because I already talked about it, but I'm just excited that A.N. Hen agreed to translate it. Now, I have passed that script on to her, but that was another little bit of a technical challenge. I hadn't actually dumped the script, I'd only made a table file. When I went to dump the script, I realized that some bits of the script were not dumping out because it uses dictionary compression. And I talked about that in the very most recent other video that I made, so if you guys are interested in what dictionary compression is, please check that out. But suffice to say, I actually had to get a little bit of help to sort out dumping that script with the dictionary values in it, but I was able to get help with that, and I've passed that script on to Annie Hen, so hopefully she will be working on that, and will get that back to me at some point in the future. Finally, it's kind of an announcement. I actually have a Twitter account, and I do tweet about all of this stuff. So if you guys follow me on Twitter, you basically know most of these things. But FYI, let's see, what is my account is ROM Translator. I'm ROM Translator at on Twitter, and it's my label is filler, so you'll recognize me that way. And but yeah, so I had mentioned on Twitter that Supper and I are working on another Mega Drive game. I think after we did Battle Golf for Yui, we wanted to maybe find something else to work on, because that was sort of fun. And we settled on Bahamut Senki. This is something that Supper dumped a script for, and it seemed short, and I was like, yeah, I think I would be up for giving that a shot. It's a fantasy style strategy game, so it seems pretty interesting. I've only just started translating it a bit, just some of the easier text in it, and I'm realizing I haven't really translated one of these style of strategy games before, so that may provide its own challenges, and it should be interesting for me. But yeah, that's basically what I have going on. So I think a lot of cool stuff is going on. A few projects have come out. I've done a lot of work dumping a whole bunch of scripts, and I've translated a little bit of some of those, like Sailor Moon, and actually I've translated most of Kaito Saint Tail. I don't know if I mentioned that. And yeah, and there's some cool stuff coming up. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that, especially Aretha 1. I think that will probably be the next, kind of major release that you see of something that project that I helped out working on. And yeah, I hope you guys will join me again for more updates on the translation projects I'm working on for the 5 or 10 people that are gonna see this. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, I'll catch you later.